Our cover story tonight is about a world domination project going horribly wrong. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative. China has invested its energy, its influence, and a lot of its money into this project. But it's a long road and already bumpy. The biggest pothole is proving to be Pakistan. Pakistan is in the midst of an election, and its economy is on life support. Economic activity has come to a standstill. Pakistan's foreign currency reserves have plunged from a little over $16 billion to less than $10 billion, and it's happened within 12 months, a drop of almost 40% in 1 year. Foreign lenders are wary, unwilling to invest or loan, except for China, which has given yet another bailout package. The latest installment is of $1 billion. China has given Pakistan $1 billion to boost its foreign currency reserves. With this, China has now lent more than $5 billion to Pakistan already. This is on top of the $100 billion, that's the kind of bill that China is running for the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the CPEC, which Islamabad has to pay back by 2024. Fat chance of that happening. Pakistan is now trapped in China's debt, and the giant mountain of loans now awaits the next Prime Minister of Pakistan. The converse of this is also true. China, too, is trapped in a cycle of bad debts with Pakistan. They have to keep spending more to save their previous investments, and so the cycle goes on. For the next government of Pakistan, saving the economy will be the biggest challenge. It's hand-to-mouth existence for them. China's billion-dollar loan, which they've just got, will help Pakistan pull through for a month or so. Back to square one after that, with added debt of $1 billion. After the 25th July election, the new government of Pakistan is likely to approach the International Monetary Fund. They want another bailout package. They need it. They were refused one in the past, and now there's a caretaker government in Islamabad. It does not have the mandate to seek the IMF's help. So they will have to wait until after this election. If the IMF agrees to bail out Pakistan, they may be able to weather the immediate storm, but dark clouds will still be looming. There is China's debt to pay, and a lot of it. In fact, money has not been a problem for China so far. Beijing has used its checkbook to gain entry into India's neighboring countries, India's neighborhood, by financing big-ticket infrastructure projects. These investments are part of China's Belt and Road game plan, but some financing issues may now force the Chinese to rethink their strategy. Chinese investors are now wary of the debt they themselves face and the inability of their partners to keep up with their loans.
More than $1 trillion. That's the kind of money China is spending on its grand infrastructure project, the Belt and Road Initiative. The projects are spread across 3 continents and cover almost 60% of the world's population. Beijing feels the Belt and Road Initiative is the highway that it needs to take to become the world's next superpower. China says that the Belt and Road Initiative is a win-win for everyone. But all these big-ticket investments are on China's terms. Several countries who have joined hands with China face a mountain of debt. Study has found that out of 68 countries that have borrowed money from China for the projects, 23 are already facing a high risk of debt distress. This mountain of debt has now become a concern for Chinese investors. According to a report put out by the New York Times, the value of deals being stuck has now reduced. Reportedly, investors are concerned over the high borrowing costs. The Chinese government has begun conducting an interagency review of various deals. But these concerns are unlikely to halt the Belt and Road Initiative. Late last year, it was enshrined in China's constitution, and Chinese President Xi Jinping is personally leading its charge. So far, lenders under the control of the Chinese government have been financing a large part of the project. Financial returns are not the main motivation of Xi Jinping when it comes to the Belt and Road Initiative. The purpose of this project is driven by geopolitics. Take the case of Sri Lanka. To build the Hambantota port there, China loaned the Sri Lankan government $1.5 billion. Unable to pay back, Sri Lanka had to sign over the rights to control that port to the Chinese for 99 years. China also controls the Gwadar port in Pakistan through a 40-year lease. Beijing is spending more than $55 billion on Belt and Road-related projects in Pakistan. Beijing is trying to strike similar infrastructure deals with Myanmar. Back in 2017, China opened a naval base in Djibouti. All this is part of China's strategy to weave a string of pearls in the region so that it can control major sea routes in the Indian Ocean. Bureau Report, WION.
The Belt and Road Initiative is a long game for China. Most of the investments will not yield gains for several years, and Beijing seems to be fine with that. The biggest beneficiary of the Belt and Road Initiative is China's emerging construction sector. Makers of steel, which were producing in surplus, have now found suppliers. Contracts for construction in Belt and Road projects are with Chinese companies. In fact, instead of hiring local workers, Chinese laborers are flown in to work on the BRI construction projects in different countries. It's the biggest infrastructure project in modern history, and it has become a catalyst for Chinese economic activity. So far, so good. But this activity is fraught with a lot of variables. The Chinese investments are made in troubled lands. Governments change along with their policies. Poor countries are not able to repay. So here are a few questions. Strategic heft is fine, but how much money can one keep pouring in to just gain influence? What about the balance sheet? How strong are Chinese shock absorbers? How much bad debt can they survive? Can the Chinese economy sustain the Belt and Road Initiative? How much will it be hurt by the debt crisis that looms on 23 participating countries? The simple answer is China's BRI is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. China is facing a debt crisis of its own. While Beijing denies that it faces a mountain of debt, some estimates put the figure at nearly 40% of the GDP. And that's only one part of the problem. According to other reports, which came out last year, the debt of Chinese state-owned enterprises stands at 115% of the GDP. Remember, China has engaged several, if not all, of its state-owned enterprises for the Belt and Road Initiative and related projects. Their responsibilities range from financing these projects to execution, even completion. So the financial health of these enterprises, Chinese state-owned enterprises, is key to the country's economy. And these enterprises are bleeding. Apart from the BRI, China's growing economic footprint has also sparked concerns. Beijing has given out several loans to friendly countries, sometimes for economic development, sometimes to even bail them out. And to the worry of China watchers, the number of countries that are unable to pay back their loans is steadily rising. Let's go beyond our neighborhood and take a closer look at China's debtors. Reports say that China gave Venezuela more than $60 billion in financial aid. But what happened to Venezuela? The economy has collapsed. The International Monetary Fund expects inflation in Venezuela to touch a whopping 13,000% this year alone, in 2018. Let's take the case of Argentina, which has again received loans worth billions of dollars from China. Last month, the International Monetary Fund infused $50 billion into Argentina's economy. As inflation and government spending spiked, what is common between Argentina and Venezuela is this: they cannot bear the burden of Chinese debt. And these are just two examples. China has been using its checkbook to gain influence around the world. On several occasions, it has traded money in exchange for influence, not for financial gain, but for diplomatic victories. Beijing buys votes at world bodies like the United Nations. For the moment, this is China's policy. Experts say it's not sustainable in the long term. According to the Nikkei Asian Review, the Belt and Road project has hit roadblocks in 7 countries: Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Kazakhstan, Bangladesh, Poland, Laos and Pakistan. China has triggered a political movement in Malaysia. 92-year-old Mahathir Mohamad returned to power on the back of a strong campaign that criticized China's growing influence in his country. It's only a matter of time before others also see the writing on the wall. So even with healthy coffers and a 6.7% growth rate, China may have bitten more than it can chew. 10 deaths are registered in India every minute. 3 murders are reported every hour, and yet few capture the country's imagination like this one. 11 people of one family found dead, hanging in their home on the outskirts of New Delhi. Was it mass suicide or murder? The chilling question still hangs in the air. Let me warn you that the details are disturbing. We're not showing you pictures. Of the 11 bodies, 10 were blindfolded and gagged, their hands tied behind their backs. They were found hanging from an iron mesh in the hallway of their home. An elderly woman was found dead on the floor in another room. What deepens the mystery is a note. It was found in the house, apparently left by one of the family. Police call it, quote-unquote, an evidence of mystical practices by this family. Could this, quote-unquote, definite spiritual and mystical practices part be a link to these deaths? We don't know. The autopsy reports of 6 bodies show no signs of struggle. Did they do it willingly? The investigation is still on, and as things stand now, we have more questions on this incident than answers. First of all, the elderly woman in the other room was strangled. If it was indeed a suicide pact, why was she murdered? Did a family member kill them all and then later commit suicide? We don't know. Why was the main door of the house open? If it was murder, did the killers have a free passage, or was it part of the occult ritual to leave the doors open? The CCTV shows nobody entering. None of the neighbors heard the pet dog bark. Was an outsider involved at all? Relatives say that they did not see this coming. It was a family like any other, they say. If it was indeed a suicide pact, what could be the pressing reason for them to commit something so drastic? The police rule out robbery. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of a forced entry. Why were the hands and legs of the deceased tied up if it was suicide? Why were the ears plugged and eyes taped? Among the dead were 2 teenagers and a young girl who got engaged only 2 weeks back. Were they forced into this? As shocking as this case is, it isn't a first. Such incidents of self-sacrifice and occult rituals going wrong have been reported in the past from all over the world. And they have time and again triggered a debate on what blind faith leads to.
Jim Jones was founder of the People's Temple Church. He and more than 900 followers committed mass suicide in Guyana in November 1978 by consuming cyanide. 300 of those administered cyanide were children. The Catholic Archdiocese of Boston was blamed for covering up the sexual abuse of minors by priests for many years. The cover-up was exposed by a group of reporters from the Boston Globe in 2002. Cult leader Charles Manson ran a quasi-commune in California in the late 1960s. He had actress Sharon Tate murdered in 1969 and was linked to 34 other killings. He was convicted and remains in prison, and he has been denied parole 12 times so far. Shoko Asahara founded the Japanese doomsday cult Aum Shinrikyo. It was responsible for the sarin gas attack in the Tokyo subway in 1995 that killed 13 people. Asahara was found guilty and sentenced to death along with 12 followers. They remain on death row.
Terror struck Afghanistan on Sunday. 19 people were killed in a suicide blast in Jalalabad in the Nangarhar province. 17 of them were Sikhs. The blast damaged shops and buildings around the Mukhabarat Square. The group of Sikh leaders were scheduled to meet Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. They were on their way for this meeting when the blast struck. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for this suicide attack. Among those killed was Avtar Singh Khalsa, the lone Sikh candidate who was set to contest elections later this year. Just last month, he had spoken to WION. He told our correspondent that minorities in Afghanistan were facing hardship. And he said that the Afghan government had done little to fix that. But Khalsa himself was hoping to change the situation. He planned on contesting the election to the Afghan parliament in October this year. The 52-year-old politician hailed from Paktia province, located in the eastern part of Afghanistan. He had lived most of his life in Kabul, though. Afghan ambassador to India called Khalsa a true patriot.
He is real he was a real patriotic Afghan, and we really mourn the loss of this brave Afghan, and we wish his family, the Afghans, patience with the loss of such an irreparable one that we just came across. And we hope that Afghanistan, the world community, or friend India will stand with Afghanistan.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a tweet strongly condemned the attack. He said, and I'm quoting, "We strongly condemn the terror attacks in Afghanistan yesterday. They're an attack on Afghanistan's multicultural fabric. My thoughts are with the bereaved families. I pray that the injured recover soon. India stands ready to assist the Afghan government in this sad hour." India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj met with relatives of those who were killed in the suicide blast. The meeting took place in the national capital of New Delhi. The deadly attack on Sikhs in Afghanistan has once again highlighted the plight of minorities in that country. This is the first time, though, that Afghanistan has witnessed such a concerted, targeted attack on Sikhs. But minority communities in general have lived under the shadow of fear for long, not just in Afghanistan, but also many other countries in South Asia. Our next report takes a look.
South Asia has been home to a diverse population. People of different religions have lived and thrived here. But this is now increasingly becoming a thing of past. Many religious communities have been facing discrimination, sometimes even by authorities, in some of the countries in this region. The 1970s was a golden era for Sikhs in Afghanistan. A majority of Sikhs in Afghanistan have been forced to leave. According to some estimates, the number of Sikhs in Afghanistan has fallen to 900 from over 80,000 in the 1970s. Socially ostracized, Sikhs in Afghanistan continue to face economic hardship. Many refuse to do business with them. The daily economic and social discrimination sometimes even manifests into physical and verbal abuse. One remains. Cut to Pakistan, where Christians and Hindus have been targeted ever since partition. They are constitutionally barred from becoming the head of the state. Their places of worship have been attacked. Some have been even forced to convert. Another group facing the fire in Pakistan are the Shias. While they are not a religious minority, they have been subjected to severe sectarian violence. Every year, hundreds of Shias are killed in suicide bombings and targeted killings by the Sunni extremist groups. In Bangladesh, the condition of Hindus and Christians has been worsening with each passing day. With an impending election this year, minority groups in Bangladesh are already living in fear of communal violence. In 2016, a mob led by Islamic radicals torched the homes of several Hindus in Brahmanbaria district. The same year, 3 Christians were shot dead and dozens of houses set on fire over a long-standing land dispute in Gaibandha district. The ruling Awami League has been accused of backing such attacks. Cases were registered, investigations carried out, but none of the reports were even made public. Just last month, a state of emergency was declared at Kandy in Sri Lanka after anti-Muslim violence. Despite the clampdown, Buddhist mobs defied authorities and attacked mosques and businesses belonging to the minority community. Since last year, Sri Lanka witnessed a surge in religious violence. A Christians' rights group recorded 190 incidents of attacks on churches, clergy and Christians. Sri Lanka is 45th on the Open Doors World Watch List, which ranks 50 countries where Christians are most under pressure. In all, one thing is clear. Repression of minorities is rampant, often with the state looking the other way. In much of the region, minority groups are forced to live without identity in their own countries. Bureau Report, WION.
And there's another country that has just come out of election mode, and what an election it has been for Mexico. After 18 years of politics marked by violence and corruption, Mexicans rejected status quo. They voted a leftist candidate to power. Bucking the trend internationally, a leftist has become a president. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO as he's called in Mexico, rode to power with a landslide margin. Mexico's newly elected president garnered around 53% of the total vote. The 64-year-old veteran politician contested from the recently formed left-wing Morena party. He promised to curb widespread corruption and massive crime rate in the country. Speaking for the first time after being elected to office, he reiterated his promise to transform Mexico and to end graft. He promised a profound change in the country's system of governance. He said he will seek to establish an authentic democracy.
A todos los mexicanos a la reconciliación, a poner por encima de los intereses personales, por legítimos que sean, el interés superior. Habrá libertad empresarial, libertad de expresión, de asociación y de creencias. Se garantizarán todas las libertades individuales y sociales, así como los derechos ciudadanos y políticos consagrados en nuestra Constitución. La transformación que llevaremos a cabo consistirá básicamente en desterrar la corrupción de nuestro país.
Capturing more than half the vote, he won by the largest margin in a presidential race ever. This is since Mexico transitioned to democracy 20 years ago. The former mayor of Mexico City campaigned to change the political scene, and he also said that he will oust what he called the mafia of power. Obrador said, and I'm quoting, "I confess that I have a legitimate ambition. I want to go down in history as a good president of Mexico." Congratulations for important from Mexico's northern neighbor. US President Donald Trump took to Twitter. Where else would he speak? To Lord Lopez's feet, he tweeted, and I quote, "Congratulations to Andrés Manuel López Obrador on becoming the next president of Mexico. I look very much forward to working with him. There is much to be done that will benefit both the United States and Mexico." Interestingly, Obrador has been a vocal critic of Trump's immigration policy and his plans of building a wall at the US-Mexico border. In the past, Obrador has referred to Trump as arrogant and erratic. But after the victory, he said that he would seek friendship with the United States. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also congratulated the populist leader for his historic win. In a statement, he said, and I'm quoting again, "I look forward to working closely with President-elect López Obrador, his administration and the Mexican Congress to build on the vibrant partnership between our two countries, create economic growth and work for everyone and advance human rights and equality. Together we can deepen our strong relationship, shape a better future for Mexicans and Canadians alike." He's a firebrand leftist. He's also a nationalist and a populist. López Obrador has won this historic election after 2 defeats. Here's a look at his political journey.
Celebrations continued into the night. In a historic mandate, Mexico has taken a left turn with 53% of the votes cast going in favor of Andrés Manuel López Obrador. He will be the country's first leftist president. Riding a populist wave, Obrador had promised to curb corruption and rising crime rates. These were the very issues that his predecessor failed to address. 64-year-old Obrador has stunned his critics with a spectacular win. He had lost 2 presidential elections in the past and got lucky only the 3rd time. Many believed that he would retire from active politics after suffering a fatal heart attack in 2013. But Obrador fought his way back. Born into a modest family in southeast Mexico, Obrador was part of the outgoing President Peña Nieto's party. but left it in the late 1980s. Obrador rose to national prominence as the mayor of the country's capital, Mexico City. But he wasn't always the people's leader. In the past, he would reject his election reverses by calling the results fraud and would organize protests demanding reversal of the mandate. By the late 2000s, Obrador made a political makeover. He now became a leader who reached out to people at the ground level. He campaigned in villages that were earlier untouched by politicians. Obrador's rise in politics coincided with the decline of the popularity of traditional political parties. Rising corruption, crime and economic inequality helped promote his pro-poor image. A tough road lies ahead for Obrador at home, but an equally difficult task confronts him at Mexico's northern border. Obrador has been a vocal critic of United States President Donald Trump's immigration policy and his plans to build a wall along the US-Mexico border. Obrador had visited the United States after Trump's victory to meet Mexican immigrants in the country. He later wrote a book critical of Trump called Listen Trump. However, the US president became the first world leader to congratulate the newly elected president of Mexico. In return, Obrador said that he would seek friendship and support with the United States. The question is, will he be able to give Mexico a successful makeover, just like the one he gave to himself? The country is hopeful. Bureau Report, WION.
Guess who else tweeted congratulations to the new Mexican president, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and I'm quoting, "My warmest congratulations to Senor Andrés Manuel López Obrador on his victory in presidential elections in Mexico." He says, "Muchas felicidades," I hope I've pronounced it right. "Look forward to working closely to advance India-Mexico privileged partnership." Donald Trump's controversial zero-tolerance policy, which saw his government separating children from parents to punish illegal immigrants, has triggered protests not just across America but also in Hollywood. This is how they chose to make their point.
We love that the American story is filled with people who come from all over the world to have a better life here. America at its best is big, beautiful, and diverse, like our great city of Los Angeles. It's not small, it's not petty, and not exclusive like Mar-a-Lago.
Ultra exclusive. Tremendous exclusivity.
A number of Hollywood A-listers, including singer John Legend and his wife Chrissy Teigen, actress and recording artist Cher, and Mexican actor Eugenio Derbez, joined a rally in downtown Los Angeles to protest against what they call an inhumane policy charted by Trump and his administration. The current U.S. administration's zero-tolerance policy led officials to separate more than 2,000 children from their parents as they are taken into custody. Most of the immigrants illegally crossed over the American border from Mexico. Musician John Legend serenaded the crowd with his music and reminded the protesters gathered that the world is a big place.
The world is a big place. There are 7 billion people out there. 7 billion strangers. We know how important family is. I'm so happy to be here with my family. We know how important family love is. We know how important our friends are to us. But what does it mean to love the people that we don't know? To see the value in every single person's life? Think about that.
Veteran artist Cher said she worries that the rights of women will be ignored and trampled upon by the Trump administration.
What I'm saying to women is get your friends and vote. Because if you don't vote, you will not recognize this country and you will lose everything that you just now take for granted every right that you have.
We are here to demand that our government reunite migrant children.
Laverne Cox, an actress who appears on the Netflix series Orange is the New Black, centered her speech around a minimum security women's prison, drawing a parallel between immigration camps and the U.S. prison system.
People, let us not forget that the corporations that own private for-profit prisons also run the privately owned immigration detention centers, which are profiting from imprisoning migrant families and children.
Mexican superstar Eugenio Derbez laid emphasis on the importance of accepting immigrants, irrespective of their nationalities.
Going back centuries, people from around the world have come to the U.S. for the promise of a better life, a dignified life. Some came here to flee the very kind of injustice that is happening in this country at this very moment.
Last week, Trump announced that the administration would end the policy, but only a few families have been reunited so far. Entertainment Bureau, WION.